And it's funny to hear you even mention missing the routine, right? Getting up every day and getting dressed and figuring out what to wear and getting ready for the commute. And so much that we do every day, sort of subconsciously, we don't think about it. And then you realize how much of that is missing when this transition happens.
But I realized that I had to do something for myself. I had to have my own purpose. And it wasn't like trying to take control over other people's lives, like my son or my husband.
Because whether it's going through something traumatic like losing your spouse of many years or even other challenges in life, there are always silver linings. There are always blessings. There are always things to be grateful for. And
you have to realize change is inevitable and you have to find a way to embrace it and learn to enjoy it. Because as I said, is when you look back at some of these changes, even if they're painful, they're suffering, there's always, again, a blessing. There's always something good, something maybe you learned from it.
Hello, welcome back.
Hello, good to be here with you again.
Hello. Yes, great to be here with you as always, Atricia. Welcome everybody to Living Richly with Curo. This is episode 103. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anne McCabe. I am the CEO and a partner here at Curo Private Wealth, and I'm joined as always by my lovely partner, Atricia.
Hello, I am Atricia Roberts, COO and partner here at Curo. Thank you to all of our previous listeners and viewers for coming back to check out the pod again. And then for all of our new viewers and listeners, welcome.
Yes, we love and appreciate you all. If this is your first time tuning in, again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And our mission here on the podcast, but also in what we do each and every day with our clients in our real job, is to educate, inspire, and empower you on your financial journeys. And we love having guests on the podcast. Sometimes it's just me and Atricia riffing on some sort of financial topic, but we also love to invite interesting people with interesting backgrounds and stories onto the podcast because we believe we can always learn a lot from visitors and guests. So today we have Mary Lou Christie. So welcome, Mary Lou, to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. So let's kick it off with there's so many different directions we can and we will go in with you, Mary Lou, but let's start on the professional front. So you spent 25 years building a successful career in mortgage finance, and retirement came a little bit quicker than you were anticipating, right? Than you were ready for. So what was the hardest part for you in that transition? And what would you wish maybe somebody would have told you prior to that happening?
Well, thank you. Yes, it came faster. The big issue that everyone talks about retirement is financially. And I knew financially I was going to be okay. I had a good, financial planning company. So that wasn't an issue. But for me, you lose your identity. My identity was my career. And I started realizing that I missed the routine. I miss, the getting dressed every morning. I love getting dressed and accessorizing and, even enjoyed the commute. It actually, gave me time to, free my thoughts and get ready for the day. And I traveled a lot, so I miss that. So that, and, you also miss, you think, oh, wow, I can do whatever I want now. I'm free. But then you turn around and say, okay, who am I going to do these things with? Because many of my friends didn't, couldn't take time off financially if they weren't in the same position. So it kind of relied on then my husband was my main, lunch partner, I'll say. But I wasn't prepared to think that losing my identity would be so, traumatic for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really hard part, especially if you're not prepared. If you've had some time to prepare and think about what your identity is outside of your job, that's one thing. But if it comes unexpectedly and abruptly, that can be even more of a challenge.
Well, you also think about, oh, where's my paycheck?
Yeah.
And because you're getting investment income, but it's like, oh my gosh, like where's my paycheck? And where are my friends? Since most of my friends were work friends, and it's
Hmm.
not the same. I wasn't prepared that those friendships would kind of dwindle and go by the wayside because you don't have the same interest.
And it's funny to hear you even mention missing the routine, right? Getting up every day and getting dressed and figuring out what to wear and getting ready for the commute. And so much that we do every day, sort of subconsciously, we don't think about it. And then you realize how much of that is missing when this transition happens. So, how did you begin, though, to answer those questions, right? Where are my friends? Where is my paycheck? How did you begin to rebuild that sense of identity?
Well, for me, I started thinking I need like projects. Okay. I need to immerse myself in projects. And it was actually funny because at the time, my son wanted to change schools. Okay, high school. So I'm like, okay, here's a project that I can stick with and I can help him with that. But also, my son was growing up, so I didn't have the ability to kind of like step in. And I said to him at one point, you start feeling guilty too. I'm like, wow, I spent so many years at work, and honey, I'm sorry I wasn't there for the field trips and, to come into school. And he looked at me very casually and said, Mom, don't sweat it. You took us on great vacations. So I was able to kind of get over, some of the guilt. But for me, it was finding a purpose. I didn't want to just be like, I started going out to the golf club more often, and I became like Tim's wife. We had a house in Colorado. Everyone up there, my husband had been going there forever. I was like Tim's wife. And at first, it was like, wow, that's a whole new role for me embracing. But I realized that I had to do something for myself. I had to have my own purpose. And it wasn't like trying to take control over other people's lives, like my son or my husband. So I started thinking I need to, do something, learn something new. So I started doing through my church Bible study. So I took one Bible study. I wound up taking 10 different Bible studies because I felt that it was stimulating me. I was growing in something. Like you could take up a hobby. I started playing a lot more golf than I had played before. So you kind of work on things, and then of course volunteering. That was a big part of finding a purpose. And you start volunteering. As soon as you start volunteering, people are like, "Oh wow, Mary Lou's available for volunteering," and and then it's like you volunteer, and then it's like, "Oh, you're really good at management. Maybe you'd like to step in and I'm like, "Nope, I'm not looking to work right now, and that's not why I'm volunteering." So you find that you have to find things that move your heart. And then it's interesting because then, like volunteering, things will just play out. It doesn't have the same appeal or pull on your heart as it used to. So you move on. Um, and, and that's what happened to me. I just kept trying, putting my toe into little different activities to see what moved me.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too about the volunteer piece, though, that you also have to be careful and set boundaries on your time and how much you're willing to volunteer, because if you give an inch, oftentimes volunteer charitable organizations are desperate for help. And so, you can, if you're not careful, you can find yourself back in a full-time plus job that you're just not getting paid for anymore. So
Exactly.
we've heard that a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so taking you back a little bit to your career at Fannie Mae, you were there during the 2008 financial crisis, one of the most turbulent moments in history in this country, and you at Fannie Mae were right at the center of that. Can you take us back to what that time was like, really from the inside, right, from an insider during that period, and what living through that sort of upheaval taught you?
Well, it was very surreal. And they say when you're right in the midst of something, you don't always see it, as clearly. Um, but we held to the belief that history will be our guide. And history was in the 100 years of mortgage values, never had we seen national home prices drop. We've seen regional recessions, regional markets fail, other markets would pick up. So we were holding to that advice that we're going to be okay because the whole market is not going to go down. Okay, so that didn't quite work out.
Yeah.
The second thing that was very different, because I kind of lived through I didn't live through the boom in Texas, but I lived through the bust in Texas. But we believed that people would continue to cherish their house as their home. And during this time, we learned that many people looked at this as an investment. Let me buy this house, let me stretch, let me get the biggest house I can, and it'll be an investment. And a year from now, I'll be able to refinance it and take money out to pay my bills. And that was not a belief. Many of the people did not think of it as their home. They thought of it as an investment. So what happened when they can't sell it and they sent the keys in. There was also a lot of fraud, which wasn't there's always fraud, but this was more rampant. And borrowers weren't telling the truth. They're like buying their second and third house. Oh, I'm going to live in this property. Oh yeah, I'm going to buy this investment property and I'm going to be able to rent it. The appraisers were really inflating values. Realtors were actively flipping homes. So it turned out that the fraud was much greater than we ever had seen and anticipated. And I guess lastly, the interesting thing was that in a normal market, the primary market, which is people wanting to buy homes, so the demand for mortgage finance normally, leads. In this case, the investors that were buying these loans, these securities, they were driving the demand. So they were enjoying these rich yields on these. And understand, there were, very little down that you could get into a house and very little documentation. So it was very easy to get some of these subprime loans. Our securities were AA. We thought we had some protection, but that wasn't enough either. But so investors really pushed the demand. So for me, I look back at it and say that was unrealistic demand in the primary market. It wasn't the primary market leading, it was investors that were really leading the demand.
Yeah, I think back to even before 2008, and Ann and I think we're probably early in our careers in this business during this period of time. But I even think back to like 2006, 2007, and we were career starters. And I just remember my friends and acquaintances and people getting approved for houses that I just could not understand. Like, how are they buying a 4-bedroom house, right? We're two years out of college. Like, how is this happening? And I remember seeing that. But I also think that there was a part of it it really played on people's sense that home ownership is how you build wealth, right? Whether it's for your forever home or even just as an investment. And I think the market just ran with it in a way that we had never seen that before.
Right. Yeah, the whole mentality was you're buying a house to build a family and have a home, and the investment quality of that kind of took, I guess, full reign.
Right.
And most people ran with that. I mean, people got hurt. I mean, some of the people did want to live in the property and they wanted it to be a home, but they couldn't afford it, bottom line.
Yeah, those no doc and
Low doc and no doc.
low doc, no doc, and
Yeah.
no credit score, no problem, no job, no problem. You're like,
Right.
this can't
Right.
end.
Yeah, recipe for disaster.
Yes,
Right.
as we know, hindsight 2020. So let's talk a little bit about your retirement, Mary Lou, which you shared with us was not your choice at the time. Usually, I would say most times retirement is a choice, but in your case, it was not fully on your terms. So can you just walk us through that time period too of what led you to leave earlier than expected and how that lack of control really affected you, whether it's financially, emotionally, how you saw yourself and your confidence, and really what happened, what did you do to regain that footing and rebuild that confidence that you maybe lost a little bit of?
Well, I would say that the timing was not my choice. um, I was probably going to work at least for another, because I was in a job that I had three different careers at Fannie Mae, and I was heading up investor relations, and this was the job that I loved the most.
Mm,
So I wasn't ready, and I traveled. I visited
yeah.
investors, all over the world that were owners of our stock. So this was something. It wasn't like, oh, willy nilly job. This was something I really loved to do, and so it was my particular position was going away because as I represented this stockholders, we were wiping out the stockholders. So for me, it was tumultuous because these were people, financial advisors, companies that I had spent years working with. Many of them, I would have social engagements with them, dinners, and so for me, it was very personal. That they looked at it. It was a business transaction, but when we were taken over, the government went into conservatorship. I really didn't have that job anymore. So for me, it was I didn't want to go back and do some of the other sales and marketing jobs. I just that my heart wasn't in it, and I kept thinking I don't really want to work for the government. So that was like it was a personal choice that and I was lucky that I was offered an early retirement package a few months before, and that they still honored that. So
Mhm.
from that point, the timing wasn't, but I did walk away knowing that I didn't want to do any more there. I played out my career there, and it was time to move on.
So it felt right. Even though it wasn't necessarily your choice in the moment, it felt like the right next step.
Right. And I did work a year after doing investor relations work for kind of a small mortgage company. But so I did that, and then it was like, okay, I need to find something different. That played out. So now what? So that's kind of
Yeah.
when I started doing, volunteering and really working on my identity. It's very easy to kind of want to take because I love control, and so none of these things were in my control. And you don't want to start imposing on controlling other people's lives.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you mentioned when you talked about the transition from your career that the money part was the part that you were least worried about. And at the time, you shared with us that you were the breadwinner, but that you did have a trusted advisor. Can you share with us a little bit, maybe about how that relationship helped you navigate the transition financially?
Certainly. Well, we had the same financial advisor, and I guess now we're going on like maybe 15 years. So during that time, we had a trusted advisor, and all along, they were advising me to lower my exposure to Fannie Mae, because I was very blessed in a senior leadership role. I was given stock options, so they were very, very good advice to lower my dependency on that piece of my portfolio. So that was really helpful. The other thing is they did things that I never would have thought about. I mean, so we established a trust, and we found they turned that we had a lawyer. We did things that that really, I guess, gave me the confidence that I'm going to be okay. You know, they did the Monte Carlo simulation, and I knew that I could keep spending a certain amount of money, that I was going to be okay. So they kind of they helped reassure, because it is kind of scary, when you're the breadwinner and then all of a sudden, you know, there's no bread coming in. You know, the bread
Yeah.
is in a different form.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching gears a little bit, Mary Lou, to more recent events that have occurred in your life. This past December, you sadly lost your husband of many years. And that sort of loss, very different, right? Very different from retiring and or losing a job. This sort of loss really reshapes everything in your life, especially when you have been partnered with someone for so long. So what did that experience teach you about grief or about, you know, leaning on other people? And for any of our female listeners who may have recently experienced a loss like that, what advice or what would you want her to know?
Well, I would say that nothing can prepare you for it. And nothing, don't ever say, I know how you feel, because people don't know how you feel.
Hmm.
Every partnership that you're in is very different and unique, and you have different ways that you've relied on that partner. And grief is very individual. You know, how you, and my husband and I were always the givers, we were never the takers. So it was really a different transition when my husband was getting sick, and people wanted to do, how can we help? So it was actually, we just had to make, a very good friend said to me, Mary Lou, people receive graces when they help you. So let them help you. And it
Mm.
was really eye opening to us. So we started, and honestly, we saw so many blessings from that. My husband's, you know, men's group from church, they were coming over, and just the outpouring, you know, we got to a point where we're kind of tired of soup. You know, they set up a meal train, and but what I realized is when people say no spice, it doesn't mean no flavor. You know, so I had my daughter-in-law in there trying to tinker with some of the soups. But so people really wanted to help, and that was new, and it's also vulnerability.
Mm.
And there were, when I was always very, very guarded, and I didn't let people in. You know,
Mhm.
I was always the cheerleader, and yeah, yeah, rah, rah, rah. But you have to find ways to let people that you trust. Um, you have to let people in. And what I found is it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole of being disappointed. And I went through this.
Mm.
I was like, wow, why didn't this family member come to Tim's funeral? Or, you know, why didn't this, you know, neighbor reach out? But I was able to turn it around with some spiritual guidance. And 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 I started then looking for surprises. Wow, you know, this one neighbor who I'd never even been in their house brought down a mass card, invited me to dinner. Um, and what about this one, you know, family member who wrote my husband the most beautiful letter, remembering things that that had happened when the boy now is in his 50s, and this is when he was 8 years old. And it arrived in time that my husband was able to read it. So what I started to do is remind my husband, as he was going through this, and myself, look at the blessings
Mm.
that you're suffering. Look at the blessings that it's giving us. And it's not always easy,
Mhm.
but it's very easy to kind of be consumed in guilt. You know, why didn't we do that? You know, but I have to say I relied very much on my faith, and I had to do. One of my priest friends gave me a surrender novena, which became my daily read. And it was, you just have to surrender. This
Mm.
is not your choice, and it's the Lord is guiding my husband. But the one thing that was interesting, at one point, my husband said, Mary Lou, I'm a little sad. We have all this money and we have all this time and we could do whatever, but we can't cure this, you know?
Mm,
And so it kind of, and that's kind of when I started looking at the blessings rather than, it's very easy to kind of dwell on the negatives. But the other,
yeah.
when you talk to your female clients, you should definitely recommend that they get involved and come to the meetings and learn more about, the financial piece of what you're doing for them.
Yeah.
Because they're really many times they're the ones that'll be the survivors.
Yes. Yeah. We know we talk about that all the time. Try to encourage
Yeah.
both parties in a partnership to be involved and at least to be aware of what's going on. So, but
Right.
I love that. I love that reframing, right? Because whether it's going through something traumatic like losing your spouse of many years or even other challenges in life, there are always silver linings, there are always blessings, there are always things to be grateful for. And it's our tendency, I think, just our the brain's tendency is to maybe sometimes focus on the lack or the negative, but it is
Right.
just a matter of reframing. And as you said, it's not always easy, right? And so I think it's just like any other muscle, you have to kind of repeat the process until that becomes your
Right.
default versus always finding the negatives. Yeah.
And the other thing that I would say, as far as relying on, let's say, a financial advisor, you don't want to do it alone. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I I probably could have done, you know, these things, the whole process between the estate and the federal taxes and the long-term care, filing and the pension filing. You don't want to do it alone. And
Hmm.
and the point is because your heart's not there. Your heart is
Right.
healing. You're suffering. And so you don't want to, honestly, you don't want to think about these things.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
someone to take that burden off you. And if I had been doing it, it would have probably taken me, another year to kind of get through some of this paperwork. So I would just say, even if you can do it, you don't want to do it. That's not where you want to put your focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your energy and your time.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, especially in those places where hurt or grief and disappointment overlap with the money decisions. Outsourcing is sometimes our saving grace. So let's ask a higher level question here because I always love advice and I love getting advice from our guests when they join our podcast. If you could sit across from the woman you were 25 years ago, you were just starting out in a career and knowing now about the life and the things that you've experienced, what would you tell her about preparing for all of these different seasons of life?
Well, it's a really a good question. I would say that you have to realize change is inevitable, and you have to find a way to embrace it and and learn to enjoy it. Because as I said, is when you look back at some of these changes, even if they're painful, they're suffering, there's always, again, a blessing. There's always something good, something maybe you learned from it. I would also say, take more risk. I was very measured,
Mm,
in my career. I would say take more risk, but and focus on the things that you can change. I used to like have so much worrying about things that I had no control over. So now I look back and say, boy, all those years I worried about all these things. That I would say focus on what you can change. Be true to yourself. And that's one of the things that when I look back at my career, I really feel that I was true to myself. I really cared about the people that worked for me and how they were doing. And I say, learn to enjoy each moment, each year. Someone was telling me, oh, and the kids, now my kids are going to be in high school. And I just looked at them and said, enjoy every year. Every year is different, but it brings you different joys. So that's what I would say. Try and embrace it because you can't change it.
Yeah, I love that. That's the
Yeah.
true measure of emotional intelligence, right? Is focusing on what you can control and letting
Right,
go of the rest.
right.
Yeah. So, Mary Lou, we love to close things out with our favorite question for our guests. We always love hearing our guests' answers to this question. But what does living richly mean to you?
Well, thanks for the heads up because I did reflect on it overnight, and I guess I'm a firm believer. I believe very deeply that the Lord has a special plan for everyone. Sometimes, again, He takes you on different roads or different paths than you expected. But for me, I'd say if you can feel, and we spend a lot of time discerning, like in the religious life. You don't decide, you discern, and that means you take it in silent prayer to the Lord. So I think if you feel like you're on the path, that is the path that God designed for you. That to me is living richly.
Love that. Living
Yeah.
your purpose, your life purpose.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. It actually reminds me of something Anne just recently said to me about the things that you ask, your higher being, higher power for. And it's asking for what, God wants for me, right? Not what I choose for myself, right? But what it is that, you want from me in my life. So it makes me reflect on that thought as
Right.
well. Thank
And
you
one
so
of
much
the
for sharing that.
daily habits that I know I heard in one of your, I've always had like a gratitude journal. So every
Hmm.
morning, going through what am I grateful for? And again, instead of focusing on what didn't happen, what didn't go well, what am I grateful for each day? It
Hmm.
really does help.
Yeah. Did you continue that practice like in the depths of your husband's illness and all that? Yeah.
I did. And some days it was a challenge to
Yeah.
find,
I'm sure.
but I found, little things that, we were able to share a moment together. So I did continue that and I still continue it. And I do think it's good advice.
Yeah. It is a beautiful practice.
Because the whole point is you want to find joy in your life and not fleeting happiness. And I think looking at what you're grateful for helps you build more joy.
I agree. And I think it's also like a snowball, right? Because the more you identify that you're
Yeah.
grateful for, the more things you will have to be grateful for. And it just attracts that sort of energy into your life. So I love that.
Well, you also
Thank you for,
appreciate things more.
yeah,
Like if I'm
absolutely.
grateful for the sun, is out today and then I'm out walking and I thank the Lord. Thank you, Lord. This is a beautiful day today.
Yeah.
I think you learn to see the beauty in things and people that you might miss.
Yes. You may take for granted.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah, I love that. Well, we're grateful to you for your time and your sharing so many wonderful nuggets of wisdom and experience. And thank you for taking some challenging experiences that you've had in your life and turning them into blessings for other people by sharing what you learned, sharing your wisdom and sharing advice. We really appreciate it. And we love strong women and you
Yes.
certainly fit in that category. So thank you for your time and for your sharing. It was really lovely to get to know you better and hear more about your story.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed meeting both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lovely to have you
Yes.
today.
absolutely. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in. Again, we really appreciate your time and attention. We will be back here with you in a couple of weeks. And until then,
Live richly.
thanks again for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Friendly reminder that this is for informational purposes only. For additional information, please visit us at www.curoprivatewealth.com. Until next time, live richly.